Well, it's giveaway time, folks. We've got a 7019 JDM model Seiko that we're going to do some repair work on. Afterwards, we're going to do a complete top to bottom restoration. At the end of it, somebody's going to win this watch. Stay tuned. Well, what do we have here, folks? I'll tell you what we have. This is a Seiko 7019 7210 JDM model from November of 1973. It's got a gorgeous looking green dial, and I'm super pleased to present this to you as our next giveaway watch. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Adam. This is Weekend Watch Repair. Thank you so much for stopping by. What we have here is our next giveaway watch that we're doing since the channel just eclipsed 15,000 subscribers. I absolutely love doing giveaways. And, when this channel hit 15,000 subscribers, I thought, well, that's a nice round number. So let's do one. This will be the fourth giveaway on this channel. And I just really love doing giveaways. I just think it's the most fun thing I've done on this channel. So I sourced this watch directly out of Japan. As stated, this is a JDM model, which means Japanese domestic market, which means these were manufactured and sold only in Japan. With that comes a few little things that are a bit different about these watches than standard Seikos. This is a Seiko 5 Actus, again from November of 1973, and we're just doing some quick function testing here. It looked like everything was working, albeit we don't know how well or how poorly at this moment. So we'll just kind of finish up our inspection and we'll dig into this thing. And again, if you're here for the giveaway, thank you so much. We'll get into the details of the giveaway in full detail here in a bit, but a quick overview. So this giveaway is going to be the fourth one on the channel, and it's going to be a bit different. So the way this one's going to work is just like all the others, you enter the giveaway by being a subscriber to the channel and leaving a comment on this video. And then I'll state again later in the video, on Saturday, October 12th, we'll announce the winner. And again, I'll explain in much more detail later on in the video. But what is going to make this giveaway different is that the winner's going to have a choice to make. They can win this particular watch absolutely free and clear. Again, and at no point, I'll say this a few times in this video, at no point in this giveaway or any giveaway on this channel will I ever ask the winner for any money of any sort for shipping or just for absolutely anything. So if anyone reaches out to you saying you've won or they need your payment info for this or that or whatever, it's a total scam. So, but they can win this watch or they can have a watch serviced and put on the channel. So I thought that'd be cool. So putting this machine on the time grapher, my initial readings were very, very poor. So just as an attempt, I decided to flip the watch over to get that escapement downwards and closer to the sensor on the microphone. And again, our trace lines on this thing are not great at all. Although we did notice when we changed orientations on this watch to dial up, I don't really trust that rate at all, but it seemed to be running closer to 0 seconds per day, maybe a little slow. We flip it over and again, we got about another 20-second jump and it's moving faster. But I mean, this watch is running, but it is not running well at all. So it looks like we definitely have our work cut out for us. There's could be any number of things going on with this movement, but that's kind of why we're here. That's the whole purpose of what we do. Beginning disassembly, we need to remove the crown and stem. And on this watch, we pop the crown out to its outward position, and then the setting lever becomes exposed. We can press down on it and get the stem removed. Now that that's out of the way, we can begin work trying to get this case back gasket off. It sits in a little channel between the movement ring and the case body. So I'll just kind of get something in there to pry that gasket out. And that gasket doesn't look to be in actually too terrible a shape. It's still got a little bit of rubberiness to it. It's not completely stiff, but we're going to go ahead and replace that. And the movement ring can come out as well. There we go. Now we can go ahead and get this movement out of the case. And this is kind of where I was really nervous because I was hoping this dial was in great shape when I got this watch. It's kind of hard to tell. There it is. And I'll tell you, I was really holding my breath personally when I was doing this work because gosh, that thing looked nice. I was really hoping behind that crystal that is just, has seen just years and years and years and years of wear that this dial was in good shape. And it it did not let me down, and the hands are just in phenomenal shape as well. So we go ahead and line the hands up so we can go ahead and remove them. We do that by covering it in plastic, and then I'll use my levers to remove the hands. I've seen some folks, a lot of people like to use Presto tools to remove hands. I've got Presto tools. I tried them, but I never really learned the trick, how to hold your tongue right to do it efficiently. I see people use those things and they just pop hands off quickly. I don't have that skill, so I like my levers. This being a JDM model, if you take a look at those hands, that's actually not luminous compound on the hands. That's actually white paint. Every JDM model I've ever come across, vintage at least, did not have lume on the hands or the dial. Maybe that's just something they do. And I'm not really sure about modern watches if they still opt not to use lume. But all the vintage ones I've come across don't have it. Maybe some do, but if there are out there, I've just never seen them. But very typical, they don't really use lume. So we're going to go ahead and separate this dial spacer. Another thing about JDM movements, I mean, they usually use higher joule count movements, and you'll see some parts in there a little better. They use the metal dial spacer on these rather than the plastic that you see on some of them. But let's take a look at this dial, and oh yes, we have a correct code. So that code 30 on the back of the dial represents October of 1973. 3N is November of 1973. So we've got an honest, legit, original dial to that case. And if you'll notice, if you do a little Google work on the 7019 movement, it'll tell you that they were debuted in 1974. However, I don't believe that to be fully accurate, because we have a case back referencing November of 73 and the 7019 movement and a matching dial. So these movements at least came out in late 73. So we may have a very early one here. I'm not entirely sure, but all the research and people, things I read saying that the 7019 movement came out in 74 is not entirely accurate. We got a late 73 model here. So that's pretty cool. Beginning disassembly, we need to remove this date disc. So we got the clip off. Now we'll just use a bit of Rodico to remove that date disc. Now we can remove the jumper. And these two screws that hold down this jumper also hold down the date dial guard, that cover plate that's below it. That's held on by 4 screws. These 2 screws are 2 of those 4. Rodico is definitely your friend on these, and we'll go ahead and pull that day jumper off. And now we can remove our day wheel, our day finger. That little part there has the finger on it that pushes the day wheel as your watch goes past midnight. Being a little stubborn on that post, but we managed to get it off. Now these other 2 remaining screws hold down the other side of that date dial guard. Pretty easy to keep these screws organized, because those are significantly larger than the other 2 that were holding down the date jumper. Okay, with those removed, we can go ahead and pull this plate off. All right, and it looks like we got some stuff going on. It looks like a lot going on underneath this movement. Trying my best not to pinch that date wheel. I usually like to get a little bit deeper in my tweezers. There we go, just like that. So I'm not pinching the day wheel with it. I'm just trying my best not to mark it, although with brass tweezers and that metal day wheel or date wheel, it probably isn't going to be much of an issue. Our date jumper comes off, and now we can begin disassembly of the rest of these parts. There comes our hour wheel, our intermediate calendar driving wheel, and then our calendar driving wheel and our date finger. And those are 2 separate parts, but it just kind of came apart as a unit. I think there's some oil or dirt or something kind of sticking those pieces together, but those came off. But now we can use our tool and remove our cannon pinion, which is press fit onto the second wheel or center wheel. That comes off quite nicely. Next up, we have our quick set finger for the day wheel. That is under spring tension. So those can be a little bit fun to reassemble, because in order to get the thing in the right orientation to screw it down, it has to be under a good amount of tension. So those can be tricky, but not too terrible once you kind of know the trick. And there's the spring for it. And our minute wheel. And now this is the return spring for the quick set feature for the day. So we'll loosen the screw and then release tension on that spring. There's a lot of tension on that spring. And now we can just remove the screw and remove the part without worrying about it flying off. Although probably is the single largest individual part of this watch outside of the main plate and bridge, so would not be too difficult to find. Now we can get our keyless works taken apart. This is our setting lever spring. Although if you want to call it that, that spring really all it does is hold down downward pressure on the setting lever itself. Normally, setting lever springs have indents for the setting lever for the yoke and all that. So I mean, it when you pull the crown out to each position, you feel that click and it stops at a certain point, and those indents are usually in the setting lever spring. On this particular watch, they're in the yoke. But speaking of setting lever spring, there comes that. There's a little bit of rust on that thing. We'll deal with that. And out comes our yoke. And that yoke is a yoke and the yoke spring and the detents for the setting lever all in one part. Pretty clever the way they did that. And it works really well. We can remove our crown and stem one more time. That gasket on that's a bit harder than the case back gasket, but it's going to get a new one. And lastly is our little sliding clutch. That looks to be in real good shape. And then I forgot a piece here, and I'm going to kind of show you. We'll zoom in here. There's a piece that looks camouflaged. I totally missed this. See this little cover plate and those two screws? Those are cap jewels for the third wheel and escape wheel, and I totally did not see them when I was taking this movement apart, and I don't notice it until well later during pre-cleaning. I'll show you that. But that's one of the things about these JDM models. They typically would use a variant of the movement that had a higher jewel count. So this is a 7019, has 21 jewels. Yeah, there's some gunk under that second reduction wheel. So this is based on the 7005, 7006 movements that had 17 jewels. And so the 4 extra jewels in this 21 jewel movement are capstones for both the upper and lower sides of the third wheel and the escape wheel. And so that's where they get their higher jewel counts. And that little bridge with the 2 capstones, I totally did not even notice. It was well camouflaged amongst everything else on the back side of that plate. But we'll get to that later. Removing our ratchet wheel now, you'll notice this screw on the ratchet wheel has got a much wider head on it to kind of hold down that ratchet wheel and put pressure over a larger area of it, holding it down, but we'll go ahead and get that removed. And the next thing I want to do is I just want to check the side shake on this barrel. And you know what, folks? That's actually really, really good. No issues with that whatsoever. We do see an issue with the balance here before we removed it. I noticed the coils, the spacing on the coils is vastly different between the 2 opposite sides of that hairspring. On the top side, they're much wider apart than they were on the bottom side of that. So we're going to take this balance off, and then we're going to have a look at that and just see if it could be a number of different issues, a couple different things that could cause that, but that's definitely something we're going to need to address. But we got this screw out, and now we can pull this balance out of the way. Taking a look closer under the microscope, you can definitely see, how exaggerated that is. That whole thing is kind of bunched up on one side, and I think I could tell from that photo before we even take it apart further what the issue was. So I think that's salvageable, and we'll be able to address that. But moving along, we can get our pallet fork out, get these 2 screws out of the way, and then I'll fiddle with this bridge a little bit, trying to get it loose. It kind of popped up on one side. I'm trying my best not to, take it off with any sort of violent action, but that managed to come out. And then very gingerly, we'll go ahead and remove this pallet fork. Okie doke. Next up is our bridge plate. This is held on by 3 screws. When this bridge plate comes off, the first reduction wheel and the pawl lever is going to come off with it. We disassemble those from a clip on the underside of that bridge. So we'll go ahead and get these 3 screws removed. That bridge plate also covers the click spring, so we got to get this out of the way before we remove our click spring. Speaking of the click spring, here we go. And now we can begin taking apart our trainer wheels. Here's our 4th wheel. And what I'm doing here, I'm not doing it for the purposes of filming, but I just like to check the pivots when I pull them out. I mean, I can't really see too much in it without going crazy high on the magnification, but if there's something just horrifically wrong, I can usually spot it right at this point. There goes our escape wheel, and now we can remove our mainspring barrel. Notice on the main plate where that barrel was resting, there's a ton of dried up grease. Lastly, outside of the part I, at this point, still didn't realize I had missed, is our center wheel and center wheel bridge. So a lot of times these bridges can be really stuck on there, but that thing lifted off quite nicely. Actually, that was a pleasant surprise. And our center wheel can come out. And I can already tell the top part of that pivot on that's got some stuff going on with it. So we'll show that in high magnification later. But we need to disassemble this bridge. So I put it under the microscope, and the first thing I notice is take a look at this. That's the jewel for the escape wheel. And look at all that gunk that's on there. My goodness. We'll definitely have to address that. But there's a little clip right here. I just cover it with plastic and then pop it off. And that little clip is what's going to hold that first reduction wheel in place. That first reduction wheel is what the rotor winds against. And that's what it turns. And it's set as an eccentric post, and so it'll kind of turn that pawl lever and thus run the automatic works and wind your watch. But that's where it begins. That is what the rotor attaches to, is that wheel. It's kind of stuck in there, so we'll give it a little tap and remove it from the jewel. All right, and our pawl lever is attached to that, so we can lift that away. That's got a bunch of dried up grease on the teeth of those two paws. But everything's not looking too bad. I think this will clean up. I mean, it's real dirty, and take a look at this bridge. It's super filthy. There's a bunch of dried up grease and all over the stuff. With a little backlight, we can see the condition of the jewels, and there's that escape wheel. And you can see all that junk that's on there. I mean, that's just horrifically filthy. So now we need to disassemble our mainspring barrel, and my hands are going to be in the way here a little bit, but I wanted to show you, the screwdriver is sitting against the back side of the teeth, and I'm just using it as something to lever the blade against, but I'm being very careful not to damage the edge of the lid or the barrel. But we need to separate these two. There may be a better way to do it. That's just the kind of the way I came up with. No one taught me, but I'm sure tons of people use that method. As long as you're careful, you can get away without doing any damage to it. There we go. We got that removed. A little shameless plug there. I am on Instagram, so if you want to check me out, there's a link for you. Well, we got that out of the way. We can go ahead and get this thing disassembled. And first thing I noticed when I put it under the microscope was that actually, you know what? There was a tiny piece of erotica on the edge of that tooth that was driving me crazy. But I put this thing under the microscope, and I noticed that the mainspring arbor is not in the spring. So you can see the hook on the arbor is not engaged with the spring. So that green arrow is where the end of the mainspring is, and that arbor should be in an eyelet in there. So I just want to see if there was a problem. It didn't look like the mainspring was broken. It just looks like for whatever reason, it's not engaged. So we're going to rotate this to the right and watch that hook on the arbor as we get closer to the edge of the mainspring. It's almost in there. There we go. You see it snap into place? That's where it should be. And why it wasn't there, I have no idea. But we'll go ahead and get this thing removed. That little arbor pinged out on me just a few inches away. We got that. And then we just unwind the mainspring as we normally would. I start out by pulling out the inner coil just with a pair of tweezers very lightly, and then just wind it out by hand. Once done, we'll lay it out on the table and see what this thing looks like. And, you know, the inside of the spring looks to be, you know, we got some bend in it out towards the edge. It looks flat. I flip it over and it's flat on both sides. It actually looks quite good, flatness wise. The inner part of the spring is another matter entirely. And you could tell just by feeling the spring, it's worn out. It needs to be replaced. So we're going to go ahead and do that. But now we need to go ahead and disassemble this bridge. Further, these are also called diafix settings. Diafix, these are still not easy. They look like balance jewels, you know, the same way, but that spring is much smaller compared to the setting that it sits in as opposed to the balance. So there's a lot more slack in it. So removing them isn't terrible. Installing them can be just a major pain in the rear. They're not as bad as the other kind of diafix, but they can still be kind of a pain. But we'll go ahead and get those removed. And I use that little sticky little, I think it's called a jewel picker. Alex Hamilton showed it on his channel. He talked about it. I bought one. I didn't even know that product existed. It's not meant for watch repair and watch work. It's meant for like placing jewels or decorative stuff on things you're decorating. But boy, I'll tell you, it works just perfect for doing this kind of work. So thank you, Alex. I really appreciate it. What a great, you know, little tip he gave on that video. I really enjoy his channel. He doesn't know I'm talking about it. I've never met the man, never talked to him, but I've learned some stuff from his channel. He does really, really cool content. So take a look if you haven't already. Here comes the last balance jewel. This is the one on the dial side of the movement. And I put a little footage in here. People have asked me, this is normally doesn't go on the camera. I just happened to catch this footage while I was moving around. But people have asked, how do I keep track of the jewels? This is how I do it. I put them in a tray, put some labels down, and then just kind of mark where everything goes. In this particular movement, on the balance, the upper and lower jewels and their chatons are the same, but that's not the case on all movements. But I track them all individually and keep it that way. So that's how I can tell what jewel goes where, and I keep track of it. Several people have asked me that. How do I know what jewel goes where? That's how I do it. Maybe overkill, but it works for me. You can see the condition of these balance jewels. We're going to go ahead and just use some pegwood and clean them. I also like to use a different method, but this is much better for filming and kind of showing what those jewels like before they start, and where I like to get them even before we put them in the one dip bath. But with some pegwood and then some Rodico, we'll go ahead and get those cleaned up. And now I want to disassemble this balance. And so it's much easier to unscrew this hairspring stud screw if you have the balance mounted to the main plate. So we'll loosen that up and get that hairspring kind of started. And now the regulating pins, the top pin is kind of a screw and it needs to be opened in order to allow the hairspring to be removed. So we'll go ahead and turn it. It's probably the best footage I got, although I bumped the wheel when I pulled away, but there we go. But now that the regulating pins are not retaining the spring, we can go ahead and flip this over and push the stud completely out. And there we go. We have separated our balance. And even from that view, the spring now doesn't look terrible. A better view here, the spring coils are actually even, but what's not correct is the terminal curve. See this arrow here and the gap between that and the outermost coil and that second arrow on the left? On this terminal curve, we want that gap to be even all the way across. And right now, it's most certainly not. So folks, if I can give you a piece of advice, I doubt I'm qualified to do it, but if I can, don't do what I do. Don't do this on an empty stomach and shaky hands, because it took me a few tries to kind of get my groove and to not be so shaky, but I'm using some tweezers. And what you want to do when you're adjusting these springs, if you're adjusting these horizontal type bends, what you want to do is find the piece where, it's closest. If you need to separate it away, find where the springs are closest and then go backwards on the spring 90 degrees. So that's why you see me grabbing where I am here and adjusting it and holding that spring with a thin pair of tweezers and then just using a fine oiler and just gently massaging it. And what I want to do is get the gap on this spring to be as even all the way across as I can. And I think we're just going in very slow increments, but now that looks pretty good. I think we're cooking with fire at this point, folks. I'm liking that. So we're going to go ahead and call this job done, see how that kind of turns out later. But now we'll just kind of get into some inspection on these parts, and we can see our close-up shots of the balance pivots, a couple of our fourth wheel pivot. That upper pivot on the fourth wheel need a lot of work. Here's our third wheel, our escape wheel, and our center wheel. And you can see some corrosion or just maybe dried up grease on that center wheel. The pallet fork jewels definitely need a good clean. The pivots didn't look too bad. But that was the inspection on the wheel train, and now we can begin pre-cleaning. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just using a piece of sharpened pegwood to go over everything and just not totally clean up everything, but I'm really trying to break up all the grease and grime that's just kind of stuck onto everything. So I do this to all the jewels and just all over the plate. And then I still, at this point, hadn't noticed that cover plate. So you saw me, I actually pegged the outside of those end stones, which don't do anything. It's the inside that matters. And then as I was cleaning it up with Rodico, I was like, oh, wait, that's a cover plate. That's end caps. So right there's when I noticed it. There's two screws holding this plate down. We'll go ahead and get these two screws out of the way. then get this plate removed, and then I can actually finish and properly clean the rest of this thing. But it wasn't until this point, much later, that I noticed that that little plate was there because it's kind of well hidden. But now I can actually peg these jewels, and this time when I do it, it actually matters because I'm actually touching the jewels I want to clean. After all that's done, and I do that to a lot of parts, not just the main plate, we'll go ahead and get some naphtha. I like using this as a second part of my pre-clean process. It's a very tedious and laborious process, takes a long time, and I do it to a lot of parts. I don't do it obviously to the balance or to the train of wheels or the pallet fork, none of that stuff. But we'll go ahead and just scrub this down with a brush, clean everything off, and then completely dry it. And this will take all that grease we broke up and everything else and get 99.9% of it clean. And that's kind of the goal, because I want this thing to look almost good enough to assemble before I put it into the wash as best I can. It may be overkill, but here's what that main plate looks like just after the pre-cleaning process. You can see the jewels. They look basically good enough to begin assembly, but when we put it in the machine, it's gonna get even better. So here we are, all disassembled, parts laid out, ready to go into the cleaning machine. So we'll go ahead and get our parts basket out, and we can begin putting everything in here. You'll notice that there's a few pieces here that were in that little photo we just saw versus not here, most notably that balance wheel. Since I had disassembled it already, I'm not going to run it through the cleaning machine in that manner. Sometimes I'll run them on the balance bridge, attach the main plate through the machine. Sometimes I won't clean them manually, but since it's already disassembled, we're definitely going to clean this manually. Also, the little horseshoe shaped spring for that day quick set, I'm going to not put that in the basket. I'll just put that off in a parts tray off to the side. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and put the spring in here and clean it, even though right now the plan is to use a replacement mainspring. But we got all that loaded up so we can move it over to our cleaning machine. This is my Elma cleaning machine. It has 1 wash cycle, 3 rinse cycles, and a drying cycle. I'll take this opportunity to say a quick thank you to the patrons of this channel. Folks, your support means the world to me. I appreciate it beyond my ability to express. So thank you so much. And I just thank you all for joining. If you're interested, there's a link on your screen. You don't have to be a financially supporting member to join. You can join as a free member. A ton of you actually have joined as free members. I mean, it's awesome. I upload a lot of content, and I just want to make sure that I say thanks to y'all. So now we can disassemble the case. Well, that was a little underwhelming. I wanted to leave that click in there. But while the parts are in the cleaning machine, I want to go ahead and disassemble this case. So we go ahead and we get our bezel separated. Outside of the large amounts of dirt and grime, that's not in too bad a shape. This crystal should press out. Although these are very thick crystals, and I'm actually using a significant amount of force pushing this out. It didn't want to go, but on the second attempt, I definitely got it loosened, but there we go. And as soon as it popped out and I saw that metal ring and all that, I said, oh, goodness. I just know from experience, that's an expensive crystal to replace. So, yeah, and that crystal's definitely seen, that's Hardlex crystal, but they definitely got their money's worth out of that. Super cool, but it's time for that thing to go. This crystal gasket is a Vitarn style gasket, which is great news for me because it's a very unique shaped gasket. But outside of it being very filthy, which we can definitely clean, we'll clean this with IPA, we can reuse that. So that's great news. So now it's time to go ahead and clean this case while we're doing that. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of you can see all the crud that's kind of buried in all the corners and crevices. We're going to go ahead and load this into our ultrasonic machine. That green solution I have is a combination of simple green concentrate and a few other cleaning agents. I find it works really well, and it's still pretty gentle. I can clean bezels and even like Pepsi bezels and all that stuff with it. It works really well, and I like it. We'll go ahead and get this thing started. My machine is very odd. It plays a tune every time I start the process, so we'll see what it does this time. Well, that was pretty cool. That gave me like some 1930s vibes. Yeah, I don't know what it is, folks, but I generally I've never really put that on the channel before outside of the video that preceded this one. Yeah, every time I hit start, that thing plays a song and it's different every time. I don't know why it does it. My rice cooker does the same thing. I don't know, but pretty cool. We'll leave that in, see what it plays each time. But so now I think it's a good time to discuss the giveaway. You've surely seen, if this isn't your first watch repair video, you've seen this stuff. And probably except for this, I was going to talk about the giveaway, but real quick, assembling this balance, what we're going to do here is we got the terminal curve in between the regulating pins, and we'll go ahead and get the stud in place. Now just kind of make sure it's seated all the way down, and it's not sitting in the jewel. So I'm just going to kind of lift this up and put that balance right in that jewel. There we go. See how it kind of sat down flat like that? Now I can close the regulating pin. All right. The next thing I want to do is I know there's no jewels in it yet, obviously, but I'm going to go ahead and try to level this hairspring as best I can. We'll just push that stud up and down, find the right position, and then tighten it down. And then once I get the jewel settings put back into place, we'll go ahead and adjust it if necessary. But with that done, and then last thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to check the flatness of the hairspring just to make sure. And the coils actually look pretty darn good. They're even, which is exactly what we were going for. Flatness looks actually dead on. So really pleased with that. And there's a chance that, the whole balance assembly could slightly move a little bit once we get the jewel settings fully in place. So again, I'll double check that and then adjust that hairspring stud. But that's looking exactly like we want it to. And that's what we want it to look like after the jewels are put into place. So I'm sure, again, you've seen this before on videos. If this isn't your first watch repair video, I'm guessing it's not for most of you. So while I'm doing this work, I'd like to talk about the giveaway. And as I stated earlier, this one's going to be a bit different. This will be the fourth giveaway on this channel. I think all three of them that we've done in the past have gone very well. I'm confident that if the previous winners had an opportunity to say, I would think they said it was an easy experience. And I've heard from some of them after the giveaway too. And I know, I hope you're all enjoying your watch, and I know some of you are, because I've talked to you. So again, on this giveaway, the winner is either going to win this watch. They're going to have a choice. They can take this watch free and clear. And again, at no point ever will I ever contact you requesting money for anything of any type. So if anybody contacts you or says, hey, I need you to cover shipping or handling or whatever kind of scam they're running, it is most certainly a scam. I will never ask you for any form of payment for anything. So just kind of know that up front. So the winner is going to have a choice. Again, they can pick this watch, or they can have their watch. They can send one of their watches to me. I'll service it to the absolute best of my ability, and we'll make a video of it, and I will publish it on YouTube. And so the reason we're doing this is, on the last video, I asked a question and asked for your feedback on, I'd like to do another giveaway. I'm a sucker for giveaways, and just give me your suggestions on what you'd like to see. And there were a ton of great responses. I even, there were a ton. There was a lot of like the field watches, like the A11 or A17 field watches, a lot of Seikos, a few other ones, very unique watches that I've been wanting to do on the channel. But the most common thing that people said, every suggestion was great, and I think any of them would have made a really cool giveaway. But something a lot of people said was, I'd love to have my watch serviced. Like, can you do a giveaway, but make it a service giveaway? And by the way, folks, yeah, these are those evil die fix settings. It's kind of hard that spring is a little bit smaller. You can see me kind of fiddle with that. I sped that footage up, but there we go. So I thought, well, how do we do this? And this is actually something that I've kind of shied away from in the past to a certain extent. I've worked on a lot of other people's watches, but it's always been people I know, with the exception of one person who sent me a watch. It was a very unique situation, that Omega that we did on the channel, which that watch is just fantastic. I am a hobbyist, right? I've done this a while, And I get contacted mm, just all the time, multiple times a week from folks who want to know if they can send in a watch for repair, recorded or not recorded. But a lot of people out there looking to have watch service done. But again, this is a hobby of mine. And, the intent was never to turn it into a full fledged business. But if I were to accept those types of requests, there were considerations I would need to make, like, shipping and all that, privacy reasons, so, or liability, since I do this work out of my home. So I've always, explained to folks who contacted me, tried to be very polite and professional about it, and I explained, hey, this is why I'm not doing these type of requests right now to the kind of the general public, and I've tried to forward them to folks I know who do the work. And but now I've kind of worked towards changing that. So for the reasons for this giveaway, and just previous requests in the past, I have taken steps to begin the process of accepting commission work on a limited basis. But with that, I've got a PO box set up now, and I've got a bunch of things ready to go. So that's what we're doing. Real quick, I'll get back to the giveaway details. This mainspring, you see how one side of that washer holding that mainspring is painted and one side's not. Generally, they tell you to put the painted side up, but that's entirely, dependent on what way the mainspring winds. Generally, most Swiss watches and a lot of Seikos and all that will wind to the left. And that's how that spring is oriented in that washer. The color side up would be putting the spring in if it winds to the left. This movement, the spring winds to the right. So that's why if you see a lot of new mainsprings going in and people installing them, and it's always the painted side up, and you're saying, Adam, you're doing this one backwards. I'm actually not. It's just that this watch winds to the right. So that's the reason I put the mainspring upside down. And that is a replacement Swiss mainspring. You can't really get Seiko mainsprings for these movements now, although technically you can, because you can get a barrel complete for a 7S26 or a 7S36 that has the same barrel complete as these as a 7019 movement, but that is a Swiss replacement mainspring of the correct dimensions. Although the bridles on those are sized like normal bridles. Seiko mainsprings use like a double thick bridle. So I'm always interested to see what kind of amplitude I get with a replacement mainspring, because, sometimes it can be a hair lower, which is not the end of the world. A lot of people are amplitude chasers, and I myself have been one, but they will run the watch beautifully. Power reserve is still excellent. And I think it's better to have a good, new mainspring rather than a worn out original. I'll use an original if it is in good shape. But back to the giveaway details real quick. Folks, in my long-winded spiel before, the winner can either pick this watch or have a watch of theirs choosing serviced on the channel. And I'm really excited to see what the winner chooses. I think it's going to be interesting. And I think the people who, I've on Instagram or on Patreon or on the community page of this channel, we've kind of explained the details of this giveaway, and it's had a really great response. So I certainly hope that a lot of people, enter to win. With that said, I do say I need to say there needs to be some caveats to this, because again, I am limiting it to wristwatches. For the reason being, that pocket watches aren't going to be eligible. Is I need to be able to make sure that if the winner decides they want to have a watch serviced instead of taking this one, it needs to be something I'm capable of working on and capable of sourcing parts for. And pocket watches can be much more difficult. Obviously, I mean, parts are finite. It's just a whole different animal of sourcing parts. And generally, for me, it's a comfort level thing. And there are just certain things on those things where I need to draw the line somewhere. So it's open to wristwatches, and then wristwatches that I'm comfortable and capable of working on, and for liability concerns. So if you want to send me a Rolex Daytona or a Patek or some master complication, grand complication watch, minute repeater or something, I will have to decline for obvious reasons. I think we all know what kind of watches I keep on this channel. It's watches for the ordinary folk, that's the stuff I love working on. And I think if you're here, it's because you kind of enjoy the same thing. So I just need to make sure that it's something that I have the capability of working on. So if you win the contest, if you want to have me service a watch rather than taking this one, we'll just talk about it. Send me some photos. We'll talk about it. And it's just, I need to make sure that it's something I'm comfortable doing. But I just see there's very few circumstances I can imagine where I wouldn't be able to do it. But I just need to take that into account. But if you check the description of the video, all the contest rules are there. All the legal mumbo jumbo you have to have on contest rules for the purposes of YouTube contest or giveaway. That's all there. Things like, the winner will have 7 days to contact me. After October 12th, that Saturday, I'll announce the winner. They have 7 days to contact me to claim their prize. We'll verify their identity. In every previous giveaway, it's never taken more than 24 hours for that winner to get a hold of me. And it's a pretty simple process. We'll verify you are who you say you are, share some information, and if you choose this watch, it'll be on its way to you. I will provide tracking. I will not charge you for shipping or anything. It will be 100% free, and you'll have full visibility of the process. Likewise, if you want to send me a watch, I will provide you with the shipping address. You send it to me, provide tracking. You'll be notified when it arrives. I'll share photos and the entire process with you during the project, and you'll be kept up to speed the entire time. I will say, though, folks, that I didn't make it easy. So the winner's going to have a tough choice because, again, this watch, I wanted it to be something that, if the winner chose to have their watch serviced, well, it looks like I would be keeping this watch, and it wouldn't be something I would be thrilled to add to my own collection. So I'll tell you, this watch turned out beautifully. It's, I don't really think I'm giving any spoilers away. Especially if you watch the promo video, you kind of know what this watch looks like when we're done with it. But this watch turned out phenomenally well, and it's not going to be it's going to be a tough choice for whoever wins it. So we'll leave it there. But again, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you leave a comment, and what we'll do is on the 12th, I'll upload a video. We'll take all the comments from this video. We'll put them in there. We'll filter out my own comments, and we'll filter out, users who have multiple comments. That way, you could leave 10 comments on the video, and that's totally fine, but it'll count as one entry. And so it'll be a list of unique users who've commented and subscribed, and then we'll use a random picker to pick a winner, and it will be shown on that video, the entire process, and you'll know if you won. And I'll wait on you to contact me. I'll provide you details on how to contact me, and we'll go on from there. So again, folks, I really appreciate you being here. Good luck in the giveaway. I hope a ton of you sign up and enter to win. So I hope 100,000 people watch this video, although fat chance of that happening, but I hope you're intrigued by this giveaway, the prospect of winning this watch or having your watch serviced and shown on the channel. I think that would be a super cool thing for someone to have their watch, and you can, show your friends or your family or your kids or grandkids and say, hey, see this watch on TV? That's this watch right here on my wrist. I think it's cool. And I really appreciate everyone. You made it abundantly clear through your comments and suggestions on the community page that we need to do this. So it got me motivated to get the rest of the things in place to be able to accommodate that request if that's what we choose to do. And regarding commission work, I briefly mentioned earlier, I am starting to do that on a limited basis, and there's quite a backlog of people who've contacted me. I will be reaching out to you to kind of begin that process. If you're still looking for that work or something, I'll do that. I think maybe the easiest way is to you can either send me an email. The email address is in the channel page, or you can hit me up on Instagram. There was a link below. I'll put the Instagram name page up here again real quick, just so you can see it. But a lot of folks contact me there. I'm learning how Instagram works. I'm not a pro by any means. I still had to ask a friend of mine again, like, hey, how do I do hashtags? Am I supposed to do hashtags, or do other people do hashtags? How's that work? I'm still learning, but I do get a ton of messages on there from folks and asking questions. They're just the kindest people. So I'm not a social media person, but for the purposes of this channel, we put one together, and I'm enjoying the interaction. So, wow, that was long-winded. So there's the details of the giveaway. I'll just one more time, like and subscribe, leave a comment, and good luck to everyone. So back to the watch. We got most of it assembled here. I'm applying some escapement lubrication to this exit stone, just a tiny bit, and then I want to apply that lubrication to 5 teeth of this escape wheel, and we'll repeat that process a total of 3 times. Lastly, everything else is lubricated except for that lower pivot for the first transmission wheel, but we got that done. And now we're going to go ahead and install this balance. And we had some pretty good microscope footage this time. So in my opinion, this microscope footage, I think, looks better than the main camera. That doesn't happen very often. But we go ahead and got that put into place. And I'll tell you, this balance installed just beautifully. This watch wanted to run. Normally, like on these 7,000 movements, that the diameter of that balance wheel is smaller than like a 61 series. When I find that when you have a smaller diameter balance wheel, sometimes they can be a little fiddly to get in, but that thing just went in absolutely fantastic. So it's only been running about 20 minutes. I did the absolute most basic of regulation. This is in no way, shape, or form final by any means. It's just, I just set beat air, leveled it out a little bit, and put it on the time grapher. So amplitude, 230s, 240s, dial down. We put it in dial up, and you notice, what we got going on here? I mean, it's about a 15-second jump. It was running a few seconds slow to 15 fast. So, a 20-second delta on this. That's within spec, but I wasn't happy. So I took everything apart and I double checked everything. And now we're really nitpicking here, but this is what I found. So this is the capstone for the balance jewel on the balance bridge. You can see where the pivot has worn down just the tiny little spot in that jewel, and that's causing friction. So thankfully that jewel is common amongst a few different movements. And so I replaced the jewel, re-lubricated it obviously, and then reassembled it, and it's back on the timing machine. And yeah, you can see this trace we've got it been running on here for a really long time. This is about 8 to 10 hours of running really steady, really liking that. So what I want to do now is just flip this, move it over, and check timing from the other side, from the dial up position. So we'll go ahead and flip it. As you can see, we don't have that big delta that we had before. We'll flip it back. I would say we have a 5-second delta, if that. So I am super pleased with that. We've managed to sort that out. Obviously, our hairspring adjustments we did are effective, and just it thrilled. And the thing is, like on the 7,000 series movements, that 20-second delta we had before, that's within factory tolerances. It really is. That doesn't mean it can't be better. And to be completely honest with you, there's new watches, new Seiko watches, like the 4R series movements, 6R series movements, the factory stated plus, they're like plus, plus and minus, like 30 degrees to minus 15 or something like that. There's like a 45-second delta from the factory stating that that's within spec. Generally speaking, if you put like a new one on a timing machine, it'll be a little better than that, but you can dial those things in so much tighter. Like I avoided the factory warranty on almost every new watch I own, outside of like a high-end watch, because they're regulated by machine. Like that's not done by hand just because they're mass produced, but they're still well-made movements. And I think they do kind of get a bad rap because they're set well enough to wear. But if you like tinkering with watches and you have a timing machine, you put it on there, you're like, wow, it's steady timekeeping, but it's not dialed in as good as it can be. And you can really dial those in. Like I've got an Alpinist that was like plus and minus 15 when I put it on the machine, and it was brand new. The factory tolerances say it's like 30 seconds, 30 or 45. It was like running at about 15 seconds. I did some regulation by hand on it, and I got that thing to like plus and minus 3. Like it's super, super good timekeeper. And it's just, you took the time to do it by hand, because mechanically everything is there to do it properly. It's just, when you make millions of those things, you can't dial them in by hand, but they can be done. And so like this one there, that, the -5 to +15 we were seeing on this initially, while that would be good enough for factory specs, the watch can still be much better. So that's why we did that. And really pleased we got that done. I was setting this setting lever and into the yoke, and I was like, it wasn't actually correct. And if you spot the problem right there, you'll know I'm putting a little bit of grease here where the setting lever spring is going to engage with that setting lever is actually not sitting into the stem where it should. So I need to get that set in properly, just like that. Now this thing is where it needs to be. I can go ahead and install the setting lever spring. And those two little dots of grease we put on there before is just, that's where that setting lever is going to make constant contact 100% of the time with the setting lever itself. That spring is. And so a little bit of grease there is not going to hurt anything. Got that all tightened down. And this little dab on the setting lever is where it's going to engage with the return spring for the quick set day spring, which is what we're putting on now. This big giant spring. We'll go ahead and get that set into place and screw it down, but not tight. We just get the screw started, basically. And now I need to set tension on the spring. But before we do that, I want to apply a little bit of grease to the back side of the spring, because it's going to kind of sit on the underside of that little post that right now it's sitting on top of. So we'll bend this thing back and set tension. And when that goes in there, and you can see the spring also makes contact with the point on the setting lever that we greased. We'll just clean up a bit of our mess. There we go. And now I can tighten that screw down fully. Next up is lubricating the second wheel post for the cannon pinion. This is friction fit. So we'll just pop that on there and snap it into place. Beautiful. And that one felt really good, actually. And now lubricating some rest of the points here for the motion work. So that's the minute wheel and this little raceway, or the minute wheel track. Get that put into place. This here is the quick set lever for the day wheel. So a little bit of lubrication here on the bottom and the second ridges of that post where the wheel's going to go, and then that shoulder screw that holds it down is going to go. But we'll get this spring put into place. And so the trick is, that I have found, is right now you put that wheel on, it's not in the proper orientation. You actually have to get the screw started. That way the part won't fly off. And then rotate this whole wheel around and build tension on that spring, because the wheel's got a little arm that needs to sit in a little recess that is machined into the main plate. And that creates the stopping action for that. But when you get it in that recess, you can tighten the screw down and it'll hold that thing into place. So as I move this thing, I'll put up an arrow, and you can see right where that, that quick set arm is touching the main plate. You need to get it in that little channel before you tighten down the screw. That'll put it in the proper spot. But a little bit of grease there on the other part of that setting lever where it's going to engage with a quick set lever, and you can see how that it functions exactly like it should. So that's great. The last thing is I'm going to take some HP 1300 oil and lubricate a few posts here for the cannon pinion, for the hour wheel, for the calendar works and the raceway, and then a little bit more lastly on the post for the intermediate calendar driving wheel. Now we can go ahead and get these components installed. So here comes our calendar driving wheel, and that little finger that I'm just grabbing with my tweezers is the part of that wheel that pushes both the day and date fingers around so that they kind of work in unison and together. So that's that little finger. Our intermediate wheel goes into place. Now we can put on our day finger, or the date finger. We'll wait to put on the day finger until after we get the cover plate put on. It's so much easier to do it afterwards. And now we can put on our hour wheel, and just making sure that the teeth are engaged with both the pinions on that minute wheel and on the intermediate wheel, making sure that it's in the right spot. Next up, we have our day jumper. Gosh darn, I get that wrong every time. The date jumper. A little bit of HP 1300 on the post. And then for the back side of that jumper where it sits against the main plate, we want to put some heavier grease. So I'll just do that before we set that thing into place. Now we can pop it in. I bet you didn't expect that click to come in. Again, I got to keep you all on your toes. But we'll clean up the excess a little bit. And then the last thing I need to do is I want to apply a little bit of 90-10 to the jumper part itself, where it's going to engage the teeth on that date wheel. And I made a bit of a mess there. And so I was going to clean it up. And in the process of cleaning it up, I made an even bigger mess. So no big deal though, we'll get it. But I'm just wiping the top of that lever off. I want to just leave a little bit of 90-10 on the side faces of that jumper. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and get our date wheel put in. So we're popping that wheel on and then making sure that it is kind of against that little ridge on the main plate. And I will pull back on this date jumper, and that wheel will drop down, and we can set that spring between two teeth, just like that. Once that's in place, we can get our date dial guard back on, or just this cover plate. It's really imperative to make sure that it's completely flat all the way around. Otherwise, we'll have some issues later getting our day wheel to jump properly. There'll be some rubbing, but we got those two screws in real quick. And I just want to give this a quick test to see how this feels. And it feels just brilliant. Love it. No issues there whatsoever. So with that done, we can go ahead and get our day finger on there. And you can see the finger on that wheel. It extends over the top of that cover plate. So you could put the cover plate on with that installed, but it's just it's a mess of trying to get it in at a weird angle. It's just so much easier to put that wheel on afterwards and to take it off before you remove that if you're doing disassembly. This part here is our jumper for our day wheel, held on by these two smaller screws that secure that jumper, as well as securing the bottom side of that cover plate. And lastly, again, I just want to put a very tiny amount of 9010 on the striking face of this day jumper. And now I was so close to getting that perfect, but I made a bit of a mess. No big deal. Cleaned up. And now our day wheel can go on. And again, this is called a kanji day wheel. So on JDM watches, you will only see this particular day wheel with these two languages. You won't see any other languages. My understanding of what I've read, and I've never seen an original JDM that wasn't a kanji wheel. Now our clip can go on. That clip just snaps into place. It did snap, but I figured you might expect it, so I didn't put it in the video. But a quick test again, the date function works beautiful. Quick set for the day, just as good. So now we can go ahead and get our dial spacer put on. This metal dial spacer on the underside of it, you can see that relief cut in. That is a relief so that there's clearance for the stem to be removed and installed. We've also loosened our dial feet screws, and now we can put on this gorgeous, gorgeous original dial. And before everything is said and done, before I case this watch, I'll go over that dial with a fine tooth comb and remove every tiny piece of dust or anything that's on it, and try to get that thing just as perfect as possible. But we'll tighten up our two dial feet screws, and those two dial feet screws are basically eccentrics. So as you turn them, this larger side of that screw kind of squeezes against that dial foot. But now we want to set this watch to midnight so we can install our hands. So I start setting the time, and thankfully I didn't have to set it too long, and I want to wind it till just the absolute instant where the day flips over, just right there. So now we're at dead square at midnight, and we can install the hands on this watch. So on these hands, they were in great shape, and that white paint, again, that's not loom, that's actually just white paint, was in phenomenal shape. So I put these just on a piece of soft pith wood, and I went over them very gently, just cleaning it up. It just the tiniest of any smudges or anything are on there. We clean that up, but I'm trying to get this hour hand square on at midnight as best I can, and we can go ahead and set this down into place and press it down fully. Not totally fully, otherwise it'll touch the Seiko logo and it'll touch the ring around the calendar window, but we got it down to the right spot, and we're going to do the same thing with this hour hand. And obviously that hour hand has moved, the watch is running at this point, so a minute or so has passed. So if I line this watch up at midnight again, right now, without resetting the hand position, it would be about a minute and a half off. So as you can see here, I'm about a minute past midnight, and that is intentional because it's been about 1 minute, since I began the process. So that is kind of keeping the hand where it should be, during the time lapse to doing the work. And now I'm just double checking clearance on everything, making sure that our hand doesn't touch the window for the count on the calendar window, and just that the clearance between the hour and minute hand is good, and everything's looking really good. So now we can just very carefully drop our seconds hand on, and that white paint on that seconds hand is basically flawless. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And we'll very gently install this hand. And now that that's done, I'm really pleased with this watch. I want to let it run in, but I want to turn my attention to the casework. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make a jump here to some casework, and I will start off by saying that if you take a look at that thing, I've already lapped this case, but the reason I don't have video footage of the lapping is because the angle that was required to lap the top side of the case was larger than the adjustable bed of my little homemade lapping setup could accommodate. So in order to lap it, which I really wanted to do, I had to kind of build a wedge system of a certain type to fit my bed so that I could hold that watch steadily at the correct angle. But in order to do that and hold it properly so I wouldn't screw it up, I had to be really up close to it. Obviously, I'm using eye protection and whatnot, but that there was no practical way to film it. So I've already lapped this case starting out at 1,000 grit, and then I went to 2,500 grit on the lapper on the lapping machine. And now what we're doing is I have a medium felt wheel, and I'm using some gray Dialux. And what this is going to do is kind of remove the lapping marks. And this isn't a polish. So gray Dialux is a pre-polish and a buffing compound. It's not polishing compound. Polishing is technically just the final step. Most of the time is actually spent buffing. So we're going to do that to the case. I'm going to use this tool here and do it to the bezel and to the case back. And a bunch of people have actually asked me, and even one recently as earlier today, left a comment. It was on the Walkman video, because I was using this tool to hold some pieces while I was showing some casework. And they're saying, what is that tool? Where can I find one? So this tool is called a Horatech polishing vise. They make two different sizes that I'm aware of. This one is the 25 to 50 millimeter. You can get it at a few different online, watch supply houses. I bought mine used, but in really good condition on eBay for a good discount. But I'll tell you, they're not cheap by any means, but they are very handy. But that is called a Horatech polishing vise. If you're curious, and I noticed it wasn't on the list, but I've added it. There's a link in the description of this video, and most all my videos, to a Google Doc where I've got some notes on the tools that I use, where I found them. If it's an Amazon link, it's an affiliate link. I've made like $6 on Amazon affiliate links, so trust me, don't feel obligated to use the Amazon affiliate links. But I've got notes on there, what I like, what I don't like, what I use, what I've bought, and then gotten away from. But if you're curious about the tools I use, I'd say 95% of them are on that list. It's a pretty extensive list. But you can check that out if you're interested. And I just added that Horatech polishing vise. I noticed it wasn't there. So now we're finishing up. This is green Dialux on a very soft cotton mop. And we're doing the final polish on all these parts, including the crown. We cannot forget about the crown. That would be odd if we had a full polish case and the crown was still busted up. So all good there. We're getting everything taken care of. So once we finish with all that, we got a replacement crystal in. This is a factory new old stock Seiko crystal. You can see the part number there. This thing, I'll tell you folks, this was neither cheap nor easy to find. But no expenses spared on a giveaway watch. I want to make sure that this thing had a proper original crystal in it. You could see it compared to the original. And I'll tell you, like, this crystal, after taxes and shipping and the cost of the part, it was just shy of $100 for a crystal. That's painful, but it is awesome. So you can see the condition of the original one. And I mean, that's years and years and years and years and years of use. They got their money's worth, but compare that to this new in there. That crystal is just absolutely phenomenal. So I cleaned up the original crystal gasket. Again, this is a Viton style material. It's just super supple. It's 100% reusable since it's not physically damaged. And now we need to put this in the case. And so what I want to point out here, I intentionally left this footage in because I'm putting the crystal on and then put the bezel on. And from my angle, it looked all right. You can definitely tell from this side of the video that the crystal's not down where it needs to be. So I had that crystal down there, and then now I'm going to go ahead and put this bezel on. And as I went to kind of move the watch over to the crystal press, I noticed that I'm like, oh, that's totally not right. So I fiddled with it more. And now you can see that crystal is seated down properly. And so when I fit the bezel on this time, you can see how much it just looks way better. It fits, it's not just kind of floating on top of it. It's seated where it needs to be. But we'll go ahead and get this put down. That did give a click right there, although it wasn't very loud, so it's not in the video, but it did click into place on the first attempt, but I'm just rotating it around and giving it a few more pushes just for good measure to make sure it's even all the way around. Taking a look at this side of it, I wanted to show this angle just because you can see how thick this original crystal is. That crystal is as thick as any dive watch you're going to come to, minus like I don't know how thick a crystal is on like a deep sea or something, but like any 300-meter diver, I mean, this crystal is ridiculously thick and pretty robust. Like it's hard lex, so it can mark with a hard knock, but it's going to take one heck of a wallop to crack that crystal. I don't see that happening, but look how gorgeous that thing looks when you put it on that cleaned up dial. My goodness. Oh, I love it. I just love it. So this is the part I start to get excited because I can see everything coming together after days and hours upon hours upon hours upon hours of work and toil. It's starting to like turn into something beautiful. And so I have to, every time this happens, I get excited. And like when I first started out, I'd get into a rush and then I'd screw something up at the very end. I have to kind of calm myself just to make sure that I don't do anything wrong. So, taking a stepping back, taking a deep breath, and then continuing on, we need to mount this rotor. In order to do that, we need to make sure that this first reduction wheel is in the proper orientation. So that hole I'm kind of moving it by needs to be in line with the post that the balance bridge mounts to. When that is in line with that, we mount this rotor where that arrow on the rotor is pointing right next to that hole. And then there's a little dot right there I'm pointing at. That dot needs to be in line with the crown. So when you have your first reduction wheel in that orientation and you mount the oscillating weight in this orientation where it's aligned with the crown, when it's aligned with the hole on the wheel and the dots in line with the crown, according to Seiko, they say that produces the most optimal winding performance. So I'm going to take their word on that. They make it very easy for, the watchmaker to reassemble it in the proper orientation, and thus we do it here just to make sure it's done properly. Lastly, I'm lubricating about half of the bearings on this oscillating weight. And technically more than half. I mean, there's 5 bearings on this one, but I lubricated 3 of them. We'll just clean up any excess oil that's there. And I just want to give this thing just a quick little turn just to make sure that nothing's rubbing. And I'm also checking the shake on that oscillating weight, and it's just the bearings in great shape. It's not touching anything. It feels like $1,000,000. It's just beautiful. So now after a bit of time in measurement and trial and error, finding the correct size gasket, we found one of the correct thickness and width. And because it kind of squeezes into a channel that's created between the movement ring and the case. So we got that on. And lastly, we'll put this case back on. You can see we did a little brushing on the back side of that case, which I think turned out really well. So this is several days later. Regulation's been done, and I'm pleased with where it's at. And then from this point on, from the time of taking this footage till the time I'm recording this audio, it's been several days. And I got to tell you, that watch has been on a winder running the entire time in multiple positions, and that thing is dead on after several days. It's just running so good. But I wanted to take a moment. I was just sitting in awe, just looking at this watch because it's so beautiful. And I'll just be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. The little lights I have over my bench do not do this watch justice in the least bit. I'm so proud of how this thing turned out. I could probably spend $1,000 on lights and not figure out how to make it look as good as just taking the watch outside, which I'll do here in a minute. But we're going to put this strap on. It's a really good quality leather strap. Although the pictures online where I bought it from, it looked a lot darker. It's a little lighter than what I anticipated, but I think it actually fits. It looks nice. But the winner of this watch is going to love that strap. It's super well made, super comfortable. But as you can see, I just decided to take it outside to take a look at this watch and take a look at that crystal. This thing is just gleaming in the sun. Thank you to those folks who voted on the community page on what to do with this watch. I put a poll up there with 3 options. It was by far the most active poll we've ever had. Over 400 people cast votes on what we need to do with the case, and a good majority chose to do a full, complete rework on this case. So that's what we went with, and ultimately, I think it was the right decision. I mean, take a look at this thing. I'm very proud of how it turned out. I think it's just stunning. Um, you've got to see this watch in person to really get the full effect. It's just a knockout. So there we have it. A couple more beauty shots for you. I want to make sure I try to do this watch justice. Make sure I kind of drive home the point of this is not going to be an easy choice, folks. You know, you've got your work cut out for you, whoever wins. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the video. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for stopping by. I want to make sure I call out and say thank you again to the patrons. I didn't want you to think that, you know, I missed putting your names in the video. I certainly didn't. And thank you again. I sure appreciate every single one of you. And this channel really doesn't work without your support. So thank you again to everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you enter to win. It's real simple. All you have to do is subscribe, leave a comment, and you'll be entered to win. Again, the giveaway is on Saturday, October 12th. Mark your calendars. I will upload a video at that point. See if you win the watch. Good luck to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to stop by and watch this video. If you enjoyed the content, please give the video a like. It really helps out and grows the channel. Give the channel a subscribe, not even for the giveaway, but if you want to. But take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you soon on the next one. Bye.